Come here, kid. Eleanor Langley's voice sliced through the clinking champagne flutes, sharp with condescension. Let's see how they play chess in the projects. She stood by a futuristic chessboard, its holographic pieces pulsing in a 3D display that cost more than a year's rent in Marcus Reed's Southside Chicago neighborhood. The crowd of CEOs, senators, and socialites in the Langley mansion turned, their eyes glinting with smug amusement, their tailored suits and glittering gowns catching the light of crystal chandeliers. It was 2025, and the Langleys' annual charity gala, a polished veneer of philanthropy cloaking their hunger for status, hummed with Chicago's elite. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, aged whiskey, and the faint hum of the holographic chessboard, a marvel of tech that hovered at the room's center. Marcus, 14, stood among the servers, his black uniform crisp but his sneakers scuffed, a quiet defiance against the opulence. His mother, Amara Reed, the Langleys' housekeeper for a decade, gripped her tray of canapés, her knuckles whitening against the silver. 10 years of scrubbing their marble floors, folding their silk linens, and swallowing their casual slights, all to give Marcus a shot at the American dream they'd fled Nigeria to chase. Now, Eleanor, wife of tech mogul Theodore Langley, had turned her son into the evening's entertainment. The guests, men in tuxedos worth more than Amara's yearly wage, women in gowns that whispered wealth, leaned in, sipping $1,000 champagne. Theodore's booming laugh echoed across the room. "Go on, Marcus, show us what you've got. I bet you can at least move the pieces." A senator whispered to his wife, "He probably doesn't know the knight's 3D jump." Another guest smirked, "This'll be over quick." Laughter rippled through the crowd, a wave of superiority that stung Amara's chest. She'd raised Marcus alone on a housekeeper's wage, enduring the Langleys' arrogance, and now they used her boy to prop up their egos. Across the room stood Preston Langley, Eleanor's 15-year-old son, a lean figure in a tailored navy suit, his blonde hair slicked back, his smirk a mirror of his mother's. Preston was no ordinary teenager. He was Chicago's reigning junior speed 3D chess champion, a prodigy trained by Ivy League coaches and AI algorithms. His victories splashed across local headlines. He carried his mother's haughty confidence, his every gesture radiating entitlement, as if the world owed him its applause. "This'll be fun," Preston said, loud enough for the guests to hear, his voice dripping with the same condescension Eleanor wielded like a weapon. He adjusted his cufflinks, flashing a grin that said he'd already won. "Amara," Eleanor called, her smile as cold as her diamond earrings, "set the tray down. Watch your son play. It'll be educational." Marcus placed his tray on a mahogany side table, his movements deliberate, his face a mask of calm. At 14, he'd learned silence spoke louder than words. His dark eyes scanned the room, not just a holographic chessboard with its glowing pawns and knights shifting across 3 planes, but every smirk, every glint of privilege. A stillness settled in him, like the hush before a storm, his fingers twitching as if tracing moves on an invisible board. Marcus was no stranger to chess. He was the city's junior champion in speed 3D chess, a futuristic game where holographic pieces danced across multiple dimensions, demanding split-second strategy and razor-sharp instincts. While his peers played video games, Marcus had pored over chess apps on a cracked phone, memorizing openings from Kasparov to the latest AI-driven matches. Nights when Amara worked double shifts, he'd solve tactical puzzles by candlelight when their power was cut. He'd mastered over 150 3D openings, from vertical Sicilian defenses to multi-plane gambits, his mind a blade forged in the South Side's community centers and back-alley tournaments. "Of course, Mrs. Langley," Marcus said, his voice steady, almost too calm. A few guests exchanged glances, sensing something off in his composure. Eleanor smirked, settling into a leather armchair like a queen awaiting a jester's performance. "You've never played on a board like this," she said, gesturing to the 3D display, its pieces shimmering with digital precision. "Custom made, worth more than, well, you know." State Senator Clara Evans, seated by a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Lake Michigan's dark waves, frowned, her champagne glass untouched. "Eleanor, isn't this cruel? The boy's outmatched." Eleanor waved her off, adjusting her earrings. "Nonsense, Clara. It's a learning experience. He'll brag about playing in a mansion." What Eleanor didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Marcus had spent 5 years mastering speed 3D chess, outsmarting hustlers twice his age in street tournaments. He'd blended the raw intuition of Chicago's back alleys with the precision of classical strategy, creating a style that baffled even seasoned players. This wasn't just a game, it was a battlefield where he'd honed a mind sharper than their disdain. Marcus sat across from Preston, whose arrogant grin faltered for a split second as their eyes met. "I play white," Preston declared, ignoring the coin toss of serious chess. "Family tradition." Marcus nodded, arranging his black holographic pieces with surgical precision, each snapping into its digital square on the 3D board. Theodore whispered to a guest, "10 moves tops." Marcus's eyes flicked to Amara's across the room. Her slight nod carried a decade of sacrifice, skipped meals to buy him a used phone, late nights teaching him resilience, unspoken faith in his potential. He turned back to the board, fingers hovering over a pawn, the holographic light casting shadows on his face. The room's laughter faded, replaced by a tense hum, the air thick with the scent of anticipation. Marcus wasn't just playing chess. He was about to upend every assumption in this room about who deserved respect. "Let's make it interesting," Eleanor announced, her voice ringing over the crowd. "If the kid gives Preston a scare, I'll donate $5,000 to some inner-city school." The guests chuckled, but Marcus's lips curved into a faint smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. Amara felt a chill run down her spine. She knew that smile. It was the same one Marcus wore at 12, outsmarting older kids in street matches. The same smile he'd had when he promised her, "Mom, I'll show them who we are." Preston's holographic pawn surged forward with a digital shimmer, the board's lights pulsing. Marcus responded instantly, his piece gliding across the 3D planes with a precision that Theodore's brow furrow. The game had begun, and the air in the Langley mansion thickened, charged with the weight of an impending reckoning. The Chicago skyline glittered beyond the South Side's cracked sidewalks, a distant promise of wealth that felt like a taunt to Marcus Reed. At 14, he navigated the city's stark contrast daily, gleaming skyscrapers towering over neglected streets where his neighbors hustled to survive. His home, a one-bedroom apartment in Inglewood, smelled of jollof rice and hope, a sanctuary carved out by his mother, Amara Reed. She'd brought him to America from Nigeria a decade ago, fleeing violence with nothing but a suitcase and a dream. Now, in 2025, that dream clung to Marcus, who carried it like a weight he was determined to lift. Amara moved through their cramped kitchen, her hands deftly stirring a pot, the steam carrying memories of Lagos. At 38, her face bore lines etched by years of double shifts as the Langleys' housekeeper. She'd scrubbed their marble floors, polished their silver, and endured their offhand remarks about her accent, all to keep Marcus in school and out of trouble. Her wages barely covered rent, but she'd skipped meals to buy him a used phone for chess apps, her faith in him unwavering. "You're my king on the board," she'd tell him, her voice soft but fierce, "and no one can checkmate your heart." Marcus sat at their wobbly table, his fingers tracing invisible moves on a cracked laptop screen. Speed 3D chess was his escape, a futuristic game where holographic pieces danced across 3 planes, demanding not just strategy but reflexes honed by instinct. He'd discovered it at 11 in a community center where older kids played for cash. While his classmates chased TikTok fame, Marcus memorized over 150 openings, from vertical Sicilians to multi-plane gambits, blending classical precision with the raw flair of street hustlers. He'd become the city's junior champion, a title earned in back-alley tournaments, unnoticed by Chicago's elite. His IQ of 145, tested in a school program, was a secret he kept, knowing it wouldn't change how the world saw a black kid from the South Side. Across town, in the Gold Coast's gilded enclave, the Langley mansion stood as a monument to excess. Theodore Langley, 52, was the CEO of Langley Tech, a conglomerate profiting off AI-driven innovations, including the 3D chessboards that had taken the world by storm. His wealth was matched only by his arrogance, a man who saw his success as proof of superiority. His wife, Eleanor, 49, was his perfect counterpart, sharp-tongued, impeccably dressed, and relentless in curating their image as Chicago's power couple. Their charity galas, like the one Marcus had served at, were less about giving back than about cementing their status among senators and tycoons. Their son, Preston Langley, 15, was their pride and mirror. A prodigy in speed 3D chess, he'd won Chicago's junior championship twice. His victories splashed across local news with headlines like "Langley Heir dominates the board." Trained by Ivy League coaches and AI algorithms, Preston played with a mechanical precision that awed spectators. But his mother's arrogance ran through him like a current. His smirks, his dismissive quips, his habit of adjusting his cufflinks mid-match as if victory was a foregone conclusion. To Preston, chess was a stage to prove his birthright, and losing was unthinkable.
Amara had seen the Langleys' true colors over the years. Theodore's barked orders, Eleanor's subtle jabs about her place, Preston's habit of leaving his muddy sneakers for her to clean. She'd swallowed it all, her eyes fixed on Marcus's future. But that night at the gala, when Eleanor turned her son into a spectacle, something shifted. Amara's hands trembled as she'd set down her tray, her heart pounding with a mother's fear and fury. Marcus had seen it too, the way her shoulders stiffened, the way she bit her lip to keep silent. That nod she gave him before the match wasn't just permission, it was a command to fight back. Marcus, too, carried scars from their life. The South Side wasn't kind to dreamers. He dodged taunts from kids who called him nerd for studying, and glares from teachers who assumed he'd fail. But chess was his refuge. At the community center, where fluorescent lights buzzed and folding chairs creaked, he'd learned from old-timers who played for pride, not prizes. They taught him to read opponents, not just boards, to see the flicker of doubt in a rival's eyes. Those lessons, paired with hours on his phone's chess app, had made him a force, his style a blend of street grit and calculated brilliance. State Senator Clara Evans, 45, was a rare ally in a city that often looked past people like Marcus and Amara. She'd risen from Chicago's West Side, her own roots not far from theirs, and her presence at the gala wasn't just politics, it was personal. Clara had seen Marcus serving drinks, his quiet focus catching her eye before Eleanor's cruel game began. She'd heard whispers of his chess victories, stories of a kid who'd outplayed grown men in Inglewood. Her frown during Eleanor's taunts wasn't just disapproval, it was recognition of a spark the Langleys couldn't see. Back in their apartment, Marcus closed his laptop, the screen's glow fading. Amara set a plate of rice before him, her calloused hands brushing his shoulder. "You scared them tonight," she said, her voice low, carrying the weight of their shared struggle. "They didn't expect you to win." Marcus looked at her, his eyes reflecting her strength. "I wasn't playing for them, Mom," he said. "I was playing for us." Outside, the city hummed, sirens in the distance, the faint pulse of a neighbor's music. The gala's chess match lingered in Marcus's mind, not as a victory, but as a warning. Preston's humiliated glare, Eleanor's forced smile, Theodore's furrowed brow, they weren't done with him. The Langleys don't lose gracefully, and Marcus knew the board was set for a bigger game, one where the stakes were higher than a holographic queen. He leaned back, the chair creaking under him, and felt the weight of his mother's dream, his community's hope, and his own resolve. The match at the gala was just the opening move.
The Langley mansion's ballroom pulsed with tension, the air heavy with the scent of champagne and the electric hum of the holographic chessboard at its center. Marcus Reed sat across from Preston Langley, the 3D board's glowing pieces casting shadows on his worn sneakers. The crowd of Chicago's elite, senators, CEOs, and socialites hovered like vultures, their murmurs a low buzz of anticipation. Eleanor Langley's voice still echoed in Marcus's ears. "Let's see how they play chess in the projects." The words burned, but Amara's nod from the sidelines, her dark eyes fierce with faith, anchored him. At 14, Marcus knew this wasn't just a game, it was a declaration. Preston, 15, leaned back in his chair, his tailored suit pristine, his blonde hair catching the chandelier's light. Chicago's junior speed 3D chess champion, trained by Ivy League coaches and AI algorithms, he wore his mother's arrogance like a badge. His cufflinks glinted as he adjusted them, smirking at Marcus. "I play white," he declared, bypassing the coin toss, his voice dripping with the entitlement of someone who'd never lost. The guests chuckled, their laughter a chorus of privilege, expecting a quick slaughter. Theodore Langley, arms crossed, whispered to a senator, "10 moves tops, the kid's out of his league." Marcus's fingers hovered over his black holographic pieces, each snapping into place with a digital click. Speed 3D chess wasn't like the traditional game. It demanded split-second decisions as pieces moved across 3 planes, knights leaping vertically, bishops slicing diagonally through digital layers. Marcus had mastered it in Southside community centers, outwitting hustlers who played for cash under flickering streetlights. He'd memorized 150 openings, blending classical precision with the raw instinct of street chess. This board, custom-built for the Langleys gala, was a toy to him, its holographic shimmer no match for his focus. "Let's make it interesting," Marcus said, his voice calm, cutting through the room's hum. He removed his black queen from the board, its hologram dissolving with a faint buzz. "I'll play without her." The crowd gasped, then laughed louder. Eleanor raised an eyebrow, her diamond earrings catching the light. "Bold move, kid," she said, her tone mocking. Preston's smirk widened, sensing an easy win. But State Senator Clara Evans, seated near a window overlooking Lake Michigan, leaned forward, her champagne untouched. "That's a gambit," she murmured to a companion, her eyes narrowing with interest. Amara stood at the room's edge, her tray set aside, her hands clasped so tightly her nails dug into her palms. She'd scrubbed this mansion's floors for a decade, endured Eleanor's jabs about her Nigerian accent, all to give Marcus a chance. Now her son sat under the weight of their scorn, his back straight, his eyes locked on the board. She remembered the nights he'd studied by candlelight, the way he'd promised her, "Mom, I'll show them who we are." Her heart pounded, a mix of pride and fear. She knew the Langleys didn't lose kindly. Preston opened aggressively, his holographic pawn surging forward on the bottom plane, a classic 3D King's Gambit. Marcus responded instantly, sliding a knight vertically to the middle plane, a move that made Preston's brow twitch. The crowd's murmurs grew quieter, their amusement fading as Marcus's pieces danced with purpose. He sacrificed a pawn, then a bishop, each loss calculated, luring Preston into a trap. The 3D board pulsed, its layers shifting as Marcus's black pieces wove a net across the planes. Preston, flustered, hesitated, a fatal mistake in speed chess. Marcus's mind was a storm of calculations, his eyes flicking between the board and Preston's tightening jaw. He saw the boy's arrogance falter, the way his fingers fumbled over the controls. Marcus had played against tougher opponents, street hustlers who taunt him mid-match, trying to break his focus. Preston's polished training was no match for the grit Marcus had honed in Inglewood. He moved a rook diagonally upward, cutting off Preston's king's escape. The crowd leaned closer, sensing a shift. Theodore's smile faded, his arms uncrossing. "Check," Marcus said softly, his voice carrying a quiet authority. The holographic board flashed, highlighting Preston's king, trapped on the top plane. Preston scrambled, moving a bishop to block, but Marcus was relentless. 3 moves later, he slid a knight across 2 planes, its hologram landing with a digital thud. Checkmate. The room fell silent, the only sound the faint hum of the chessboard shutting down. Preston stared at the board, his face pale, his cufflinks still as he gripped the table. Eleanor's smile froze, her champagne glass trembling in her hand. Theodore's jaw tightened, his eyes darting to the guests, who whispered in stunned disbelief. Senator Clara Evans stood, clapping slowly, her applause breaking the tension like a crack of thunder. A few others joined, their hesitant claps echoing in the vast ballroom. Marcus stood, his expression unchanged, though his heart raced. He met Amara's eyes across the room, her face alight with pride, her lips trembling as she fought back tears. The victory wasn't just his, it was theirs, a defiance of every slight she'd endured. But Marcus saw Preston's glare, a mix of humiliation and rage, and Eleanor's cold stare, her fingers tightening around her glass. The Langleys weren't used to losing, and Marcus felt the weight of their resentment settle like a storm cloud. "Impressive, kid," Eleanor said, her voice tight, forcing a smile. "A lucky streak." She turned to the crowd, raising her glass. "Let's give him a hand. $5,000 to some inner-city school, as promised." The guests clapped, but their applause felt hollow, their eyes shifting between Marcus and the Langleys. Clara Evans approached Marcus, her voice low. "You've got talent, young man. Don't let them dim it." As Amara rejoined the servers, her hands steady now, Marcus felt the room's air shift. The victory was sweet, but the Langley silence was dangerous. Preston pushed past him, muttering, "This isn't over." Marcus watched him go, his fingers still tingling from the board's controls. The gala's lights glittered, but the real game was just beginning, and Marcus knew the next move would come at a cost. Preston Langley's parting words, "This isn't over," hung in Marcus Reed's mind like a storm cloud as he left the gala, Amara's arm around his shoulder. The victory over Chicago's junior chess champion had sent ripples through the Langley mansion, but Marcus felt the weight of their resentment in every cold glance. The holographic chessboard's glow faded behind him, but the real game was escalating, and the stakes were no longer just pride. Weeks later, Marcus stood backstage at the U.S. Junior Speed 3D Chess Championship, the United Center's arena buzzing with thousands of spectators. The air was thick with the hum of drones filming for ESPN, their red lights darting like fireflies. Marcus adjusted his second-hand blazer, its sleeves slightly too short, and clutched a water bottle handed to him by a staff member. His heart raced, not from nerves, but from the fire of proving himself again. Amara sat in the stands, her calloused hands clasped, her eyes scanning the crowd for the Langleys. She'd warned Marcus to stay sharp. "They don't lose gracefully, my king." Preston had orchestrated Marcus's entry into the championship, a calculated move masked as generosity. After the gala humiliation, he'd convinced his parents, Theodore and Eleanor, to sponsor Marcus's registration, framing it as a chance to give back to the community. But Marcus saw through the ploy. Preston wanted a public stage to crush him, to erase the stain of that 18-move checkmate. Eleanor, her reputation as Chicago's queen of philanthropy at risk, had darker plans. She'd hired a discreet operative, a former chemist turned fixer, to slip a rare herbal extract into Marcus's water before the final match. The compound, derived from a South American plant, dulled focus and slowed reflexes, undetectable by any test, a perfect sabotage for a game where seconds decided fates. The arena's lights dimmed, and the holographic 3D chessboard lit up, its pieces shimmering across 3 planes. Marcus and Preston faced off in the final, their names flashing on massive screens. Preston, in a tailored suit, flashed his signature smirk, adjusting his cufflinks with theatrical flair. "Ready to lose properly this time?" he muttered, loud enough for Marcus to hear. The crowd, a mix of chess enthusiasts and social media influencers, cheered, unaware of the Langley scheme. Hashtags like Chicago Chess Showdown trended on X, amplifying the match's stakes. Marcus opened with a bold knight leap to the middle plane, his street-honed instincts guiding each move. But as the game progressed, his vision blurred, his fingers sluggish on the board's controls. The extract was working. His mind, usually a storm of calculations, felt like it was wading through fog. Preston pounced, his pieces slicing through the 3D planes with ruthless precision, exploiting every hesitation. Marcus's heart sank as he missed a critical bishop defense, his hands trembling. The crowd gasped as Preston's rook surged forward, pinning Marcus's king. "Checkmate," Preston declared, his voice smug, the board's lights flashing victory.
The arena roared, but Marcus barely heard it. His head spun, his stomach churning as he stood, the water bottle still clutched in his hand. Amara's face in the stands was a blur of anguish, her hands covering her mouth. She'd seen Marcus play through colds, hunger, even power outages, but never like this. His sharpness dulled, his confidence shattered. Theodore and Eleanor, seated in a VIP box, exchanged satisfied nods, Eleanor's diamond earrings glinting under the arena lights. Preston basked in the applause, his grin a mirror of his mother's arrogance as he accepted the championship trophy and a spot on the U.S. national team. Backstage, Marcus slumped against a wall, the concrete cold against his back. The water bottle slipped from his hand, rolling across the floor. He replayed every move in his mind, searching for where he'd faltered, but the fog in his head clouded his thoughts. "I let you down, Mom," he whispered to himself, his voice breaking. Amara found him, her eyes red but resolute. She knelt beside him, her calloused hand on his cheek. "You didn't lose, Marcus," she said, her Nigerian accent thick with conviction. "Something wasn't right. I saw it in your eyes." Marcus shook his head, guilt gnawing at him. He'd carried their dreams, hers, his, the Southside's, onto that stage, only to stumble. The community center where he'd learned chess, the old-timers who taught him to read opponents, the nights he'd studied by candlelight, all felt like they'd crumbled with that checkmate. Amara pulled him close, the faint scent of her jollof rice lingering on her clothes, a reminder of home. "We don't give up, my king," she said. "We fight." In the VIP box, Eleanor sipped champagne, her smile tight as she watched the crowd's adoration shift to Preston. But a staff member, a young woman who'd served at the gala and overheard Eleanor's instructions to the chemist, lingered nearby, her phone recording silently. She'd seen Amara's quiet dignity, Marcus's raw talent, and the Langleys' cruelty. Her thumb hovered over the send button, a video file ready to change everything. Marcus stood, his legs unsteady but his jaw set. The arena's cheers faded as he and Amara left, the city skyline looming outside. The loss stung, but something deeper, a flicker of suspicion, burned in Marcus's gut. The Langleys had played a dirty move, and he felt it in the fog that clouded his mind. As they stepped into the Chicago night, the distant wail of sirens mixed with the hum of his resolve. This wasn't the end of the board, just a move in a larger game, one Marcus was determined to win. Marcus Reed sat on the edge of his bed, the faint glow of a street lamp seeping through the cracked blinds of their Inglewood apartment. The water bottle from the U.S. Junior Speed 3D Chess Championship lay discarded in a corner, a silent reminder of his defeat. The fog that had clouded his mind during the match lingered in his memory, a nagging suspicion that something had been wrong. At 14, he'd carried his mother's dreams and his community's hopes onto that arena stage, only to stumble under Preston Langley's smug grin. Amara's words, "Something wasn't right," echoed in his head, but the weight of failure pressed harder, pinning him to the mattress like a checkmated king. Amara moved quietly in their tiny kitchen, the scent of jollof rice filling the air, a ritual that grounded them through every hardship. Her hands, calloused from years of cleaning the Langleys' mansion, stirred the pot with deliberate care. She hadn't spoken much since the match, her silence heavy with the pain of watching her son break. But her eyes, when they met Marcus's, burned with a mother's unyielding faith. "We don't give up, my king," she'd said backstage, her Nigerian accent thick with resolve. Yet Marcus couldn't shake the guilt. He'd let her down, let Inglewood down, let himself down. A faint buzz broke the silence. Marcus's cracked phone, propped on a stack of library books, lit up with a notification. An anonymous message, no sender ID, just a video file labeled Truth. His heart skipped as he tapped the screen, the video loading with a grainy flicker. The footage showed a dimly lit corridor outside the United Center's VIP lounge hours before the championship final. Eleanor Langley's voice, unmistakable in its icy precision, cut through. "Make sure it's in his water. The extract, not too much, just enough to dull him." A man's voice, low and hesitant, replied, "It's done, Mrs. Langley. He won't know." The camera panned to Eleanor's face, her diamond earrings catching the light, as she nodded, her lips curling into a satisfied smirk. Marcus's breath caught, his fingers tightening around the phone. The fog in his mind wasn't his fault. It was sabotage. The Langleys, unwilling to let a Southside kid outshine their prodigy, had played dirty. Rage surged through him, hot and sharp, but fear followed close behind. Exposing Eleanor meant taking on a family with enough wealth and connections to crush them. Amara could lose her job, their apartment, their fragile foothold in America. He replayed the video, each word a knife twisting in his gut. Amara noticed his silence and crossed the room, her apron dusted with spices. "What is it, Marcus?" she asked, her voice soft but urgent. He handed her the phone, his hands trembling. She watched the video, her jaw tightening, her eyes narrowing with a fury she rarely showed. "They did this to you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "To us." She set the phone down, her hands steady now, and knelt before him. "This is not just about chess, my son. This is about who we are."
Marcus looked away, his mind a chessboard of conflicting moves. He saw their life unraveling, eviction notices, Amara's exhausted face, the taunts of kids who'd call him a snitch. But he also saw the Southside old-timers who taught him chess, their weathered hands moving pieces with pride, telling him to stand tall. He saw Amara's sacrifices, skipped meals, late nights, her dream of a better life for him. "What if they come after us, Mom?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're powerful." Amara's eyes softened, but her voice was steel. "In Nigeria, I saw powerful men try to break us. They failed because we held to the truth. The truth is your strongest move, Marcus. It's our checkmate." She cupped his face, her calloused fingers warm against his skin. "You are not just fighting for you. You're fighting for every kid like you, every mother like me." Marcus nodded, his resolve hardening like a pawn reaching the 8th rank. He forwarded the video to a local journalist, a contact he'd met at a community center tournament, someone who'd covered his city championship win. Within hours, the video hit X, uploaded by an anonymous account with the hashtag #JusticeForMarcus. The platform exploded. Clips of Eleanor's cold instructions shared thousands of times. Comments flooding in from chess fans, activists, and everyday Chicagoans. Langley Tech's CEO wife sabotaged a kid, one post read. This is why we don't trust the elite, another declared. The video racked up millions of views, the outrage a wildfire spreading across the city. By morning, the U.S. Chess Federation issued a statement. The championship results were under review. Protesters gathered outside Langley Tech's downtown headquarters, their signs demanding justice. Senator Clara Evans, who'd clapped for Marcus at the gala, called a press conference, her voice steady on live TV. This young man's talent was stolen by greed, she said, her eyes fierce. Chicago stands with Marcus Reed, and I'll ensure he gets a fair rematch. Her words, amplified across X, turned Marcus into a symbol of resistance against systemic unfairness. Amara sat beside Marcus on their worn couch, the TV flickering with news coverage. The scent of Jalo rice lingered, a reminder of home amidst the chaos. Marcus's phone buzzed with messages, support from community center friends, strangers rooting for him, even a chess coach offering to train him for free. But his eyes stayed on Amara, her proud smile anchoring him. "You did right, my king," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Now show them what you're made of." Outside, Chicago's skyline loomed, its lights a mix of promise and threat. The video had shifted the board, but the Langleys wouldn't fold easily. Marcus felt the weight of the city's eyes on him, the pressure of a rematch that could redefine his future. He closed his laptop, the screen's glow fading, and stood. The truth was out, and the next move was his.
The United Center's arena roared with anticipation, its lights blazing down on the holographic chessboard at center stage. Marcus Reed, 14, stood backstage, his second-hand blazer swapped for a plain black hoodie, his fingers flexing as if already moving pieces. The air buzzed with the hum of ESPN drones, their red lights weaving through the crowd of 12,000, chess fans, activists, and influencers drawn by the viral #JusticeForMarcus hashtag. The video exposing Eleanor Langley's sabotage had turned Marcus into a symbol, and tonight's rematch against Preston Langley was more than a game, it was a reckoning. Amara sat in the stands, her hands clasped, her eyes locked on the stage, whispering a prayer in Yoruba. "You've got this, my king," she'd told him that morning, her voice steady despite the weight of their shared fight. The past week had been a whirlwind. After Marcus leaked the video, X had erupted, the clip of Eleanor's cold instructions racking up millions of views. Protesters had swarmed Langley Tech's headquarters, and the U.S. Chess Federation, under pressure, had nullified the original championship results, scheduling this televised rematch. Senator Clara Evans, whose public support had amplified the cause, sat in a front-row seat, her presence a shield against the Langleys' influence. Marcus felt the city's eyes on him, from Inglewood's community centers to Chicago's skyscrapers, their hopes woven into every move he'd make. On stage, Preston Langley adjusted his cufflinks, his tailored suit pristine, but his usual smirk faltered. At 15, Chicago's junior speed 3D chess champion was rattled. His family's reputation was crumbling, and the crowd's cheers leaned toward Marcus. The Langleys had fought back, spreading rumors on X that Marcus's gala win was a fluke, a lucky streak by a South Side kid. Theodore and Eleanor watched from a VIP box, their faces tight, Eleanor's diamond earrings glinting under the arena lights. They'd hired PR firms to spin the narrative, but the truth had outrun their lies. The arena darkened, the holographic 3D board igniting with a digital shimmer, its pieces pulsing across 3 planes. Marcus sat across from Preston, the board's controls cool under his fingers. The crowd hushed as the announcer's voice boomed. Marcus Reed versus Preston Langley for the U.S. Junior Championship. Hashtags flashed on massive screens. Hashtags justice for Marcus. Hashtag checkmate the elite, drawing roars. Marcus's heart pounded, but his mind was clear, sharpened by weeks of relentless training. He'd spent nights blending Southside street tactics with classical 3D strategies, studying Preston's AI-driven matches to predict his moves. Preston opened with a pawn to the middle plane, a cautious Queen's Gambit variant, his eyes darting to Marcus for a reaction. Marcus responded with a knight leap to the top plane, a bold street-style move that made the crowd murmur. He'd learned this in Inglewood, where old-timers played for pride, teaching him to unsettle opponents with unpredictable openings. Preston's brow furrowed, his confidence shaken by the unfamiliar gambit. Marcus pressed on, sacrificing a pawn to lure Preston's pieces into a crowded lower plane, a trap.
The board's holograms danced, knights vaulting vertically, rooks slicing through layers. Marcus's fingers flew across the controls, each move a calculated risk, his street-honed instincts reading Preston's hesitation. The crowd leaned forward, their cheers swelling as Marcus gained ground. Amara's hands trembled in her lap, her breath catching with every move. She saw the boy who'd studied by candlelight, who'd promised to show the world who they were. Senator Clara Evans watched intently, her pen tapping a notebook, her faith in Marcus unwavering. Preston, rattled, shifted to defense, his pieces retreating to protect his king. Marcus saw his chance, a psychological gambit. He sacrificed a bishop, its hologram dissolving with a digital buzz, drawing gasps from the crowd. The move exposed his flank, but baited Preston into overextending his rook. Marcus's eyes narrowed, his mind a storm of calculations. He'd played against tougher foes, street hustlers who'd taunt him to break his focus. Preston's polished training was unraveling, his fingers fumbling on the controls. "Check," Marcus said, his voice low but firm, sliding a rook diagonally across two planes. The board flashed, highlighting Preston's king, cornered on the middle plane. The crowd erupted, phones raised to capture the moment. Preston scrambled, moving a knight to block, but Marcus was relentless. He maneuvered a pawn upward, its hologram glowing as it locked Preston's pieces in a vise. The timer ticked down. Speed 3D chess gave no room for hesitation. Preston's face paled, his cufflinks still as he gripped the table. Marcus leaned forward, his hoodie's hood casting a shadow over his face. He saw Amara in the stands, her eyes shining with pride. He saw the Southside old-timers, their lessons etched in his moves. He saw every kid like him, watching on live streams, hoping for a win against the odds. With a final move, he slid a knight across the top plane, its hologram landing with a thud. The board pulsed, the word check blazing in red. Preston's king had nowhere to run. The arena held its breath, the drone's lights freezing on the board. Marcus's heart raced, but his face stayed calm, his eyes locked on Preston's. The champion's arrogance had cracked, his shoulders slumping as he stared at the board. The crowd waited, the tension thick enough to choke on. Marcus's fingers hovered, ready for the final blow, the weight of Chicago's hopes pressing down. This wasn't just a match, it was a move toward justice, and Marcus was one step from turning the board in his favor. The United Center's arena vibrated with the roar of 12,000 voices, their cheers a tidal wave crashing over Marcus Reed as he leaned over the holographic chessboard. The 3D pieces pulsed, their digital glow casting sharp shadows across his black hoodie. His knight hovered on the top plane, one move from pinning Preston Langley's king. The ESPN drones circled overhead, their red lights capturing every second for the 12 million viewers live streaming on X, where hashtag justice for Marcus trended like wildfire. Marcus's heart pounded, but his hands were steady, his mind a razor slicing through the chaos. At 14, he carried more than a game. He carried his mother's sacrifices, his community's hopes, and the truth that had brought him back to this stage. Preston Langley, 15, gripped the table, his tailored suit creased, his blonde hair disheveled. The Chicago Junior Speed 3D chess champion's arrogance had crumbled, his eyes darting across the board, searching for an escape. Marcus's trap, a street-style gambit blending Southside instinct with classical precision, had locked his pieces in a vice. The crowd sensed it, their shouts swelling as the timer ticked down, each second a hammer blow in the high-stakes world of Speed 3D chess. Amara sat in the stands, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles paled, her breath catching with every move. Senator Clara Evans, front row, leaned forward, her eyes fierce with pride, a pen still in her hand from signing autographs for supporters. Marcus saw it all in his peripheral vision, Amara's unwavering faith, Clara's nod of encouragement, the sea of phones raised to capture history. He'd trained for this moment since the video exposed Eleanor Langley's sabotage. Nights spent honing his game in Inglewood's community center, blending the old-timers' lessons with AI-driven strategies. The Langleys' lies, calling his gala win a fluke, had only fueled him. In the VIP box, Theodore and Eleanor watched, their faces stone, Eleanor's diamond earrings glinting like cold stars. Their PR campaign had failed. The crowd's energy was Marcus's now. Preston moved a bishop, a desperate block, its hologram flickering as it landed. Marcus didn't hesitate. He slid a rook diagonally across two planes, its digital thud echoing through the arena speakers. "Check," he said, his voice low but carrying a weight that silenced the murmurs. The board flashed red, Preston's king cornered on the middle plane. The crowd erupted, their cheers a thunderclap, but Marcus stayed focused, his eyes locked on Preston's trembling hands. He'd faced tougher opponents, street hustlers who'd taunt him to break his focus, and Preston's polished training was no match for his grit. Preston scrambled, pushing a pawn to protect his king, but Marcus saw the endgame. He'd played this out in his mind 100 times, in the dim light of his apartment, Amara's jollof rice simmering in the background. He moved a knight vertically, its hologram soaring to the top plane, cutting off Preston's last escape. The crowd roared, sensing the kill. Marcus's mind flashed to the south side, to the old-timers who'd taught him to read an opponent's fear, to the knights he'd promised Amara he'd show the world who they were. This was their move, their moment. With a final flick of his wrist, Marcus slid a pawn across the bottom plane, its hologram locking into place with a digital snap. "Checkmate," he said, his voice steady, slicing through the arena's din. The board blazed red, the word "checkmate" pulsing across its planes. The crowd exploded, leaping to their feet, their cheers shaking the rafters. Phones lit up, live streams flooding X with clips of the moment. Preston stared at the board, his face ashen, his cufflinks still as he slumped back. For the first time, he looked like a kid, not a champion, his arrogance shattered. Marcus stood, his hoodie's hood falling back, his face calm, but his eyes burning with quiet triumph. He met Amara's gaze in the stands, her face alight with tears and pride, her hands clapping fiercely. She'd scrubbed floors for a decade, endured the Langley slights, and now her son had turned their game against them. Clara Evans rose, her applause steady, her voice calling out, "Well done, Marcus!" The crowd echoed her, their chants of "Marcus, Marcus," drowning out the drone's hum. In the VIP box, Eleanor's champagne glass trembled, her lips a thin line. Theodore's jaw clenched, his eyes darting to the crowd, knowing their empire was cracking. The hashtags on X shifted. Hashtag Langley downfall joined hashtag Justice for Marcus, posts calling out their corruption spreading like wildfire. Preston pushed past Marcus, his shoulder brushing him, but he paused, turning back. "Good game," he muttered, his voice barely audible, his hand extended.
Marcus shook it, seeing not just a rival, but a kid caught in his parents' shadow. For a moment, empathy flickered. Marcus knew pressure too. The announcer's voice boomed, "Marcus Reed, your new U.S. Junior Champion!" The crowd roared louder, confetti raining down, the holographic board resetting with a faint buzz. Marcus stood center stage, the lights hot on his skin, the weight of the moment sinking in. He'd won more than a title. He'd exposed the Langleys' lies, given voice to every kid like him, every mother like Amara. But as he raised a hand to the crowd, his eyes caught Eleanor's glare, cold and unyielding. The board was clear, but the game wasn't over. Amara pushed through the crowd to reach him, her arms wrapping around him, the scent of her perfume grounding him. "You showed them, my king," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Marcus hugged her back, feeling the weight of their journey, from Nigeria's violence to Chicago's South Side, from a housekeeper's wages to this stage. The crowd's cheers faded to a hum, but Marcus's resolve burned brighter. The Langleys' reckoning was coming, and he was ready.
The echo of the United Center's cheers still rang in Marcus Reed's ears as he stood in the U.S. Chess Federation's ceremony hall, a modest Chicago venue bathed in soft light. The holographic chessboard from the championship was gone, replaced by a simple podium where a gold trophy gleamed, etched with U.S. Junior Speed 3D Chess Champion 2025. At 14, Marcus stood tall in his black hoodie, his hand steady as he accepted the title and a spot on the U.S. national team. The crowd, smaller now, but filled with familiar faces from Inglewood's community centers, clapped fiercely, their pride louder than any arena roar. Amara sat in the front row, her eyes glistening, her calloused hands clasped over a worn scarf from Nigeria, a symbol of their journey. The weeks following Marcus's televised Checkmate had shaken Chicago. The viral video of Eleanor Langley's sabotage, paired with Marcus's stunning victory over Preston, had ignited a firestorm on X. Hashtags like #JusticeForMarcus and Langley Downfall trended for days, with millions sharing clips of Marcus's final move, a pawn sliding across the 3D board's bottom plane, sealing Preston's fate. Langley Tech's stock plummeted as shareholders, spooked by the scandal, pulled out. Protesters picketed their downtown headquarters, signs reading "Truth over Power" waving in the wind. Eleanor's public apology on CNN, delivered in a clipped tone with her diamond earrings conspicuously absent, did little to quell the outrage. "I made a mistake," she said, her eyes avoiding the camera. "I deeply regret any distress caused." The words felt hollow, and the public knew it. Theodore Langley faced a deeper reckoning. The video had sparked investigations into Langley Tech's practices, uncovering shady deals and labor violations that stretched beyond the chess scandal. Federal agents raided their offices, their glass towers no longer a shield. Whispers of fraud and tax evasion swirled, and Theodore's once booming laugh was silenced, his empire teetering. Preston, stripped of his championship title, withdrew from public view, his cufflinks and smirk replaced by a quiet retreat to private tutors. Marcus, watching the news in their Inglewood apartment, felt a pang of empathy. Preston was a kid, caught in his parents' game, but justice had demanded its price. Amara's life shifted too. The Langleys, under pressure, had let her go, but the community rallied. A crowdfunding campaign, fueled by #JusticeForMarcus, raised enough to cover their rent for a year and move them to a brighter, two-bedroom apartment in Hyde Park, its windows letting in sunlight that felt hope. The scent of jollof rice filled their new home as Amara hung Marcus's trophy on the wall, her fingers tracing its edges. "This is for us," she said, her voice thick with pride, her Nigerian accent a melody of resilience. Marcus hugged her, feeling the weight of her sacrifices. Years of skipped meals, late nights, and silent endurance finally bearing fruit.
Senator Clara Evans, whose support had turned the tide, visited Marcus at their new apartment. Over cups of tea, she offered more than words. "MIT has a chess program," she said, her eyes warm but sharp, "and a full scholarship with your name on it." Marcus's jaw dropped, his mind racing. MIT, the dream he'd never dared voice, a place where his 145 IQ could soar. Clara smiled, handing him a letter from the admissions office. "You've earned this, Marcus. Show them what Chicago's South Side can do." Marcus didn't stop at his own dreams. Inspired by the old-timers who'd taught him chess, he launched a free speed 3D chess program at Inglewood's Community Center. Kids from the neighborhood, some in sneakers as worn as his used to be, gathered under flickering fluorescent lights, their laughter mixing with the hum of digital boards donated by Clara's allies. Marcus taught them the same moves he'd used against Preston, street-style gambits blended with classical precision, his voice steady, his eyes bright with purpose. "Chess isn't just a game," he told them, echoing his mother's words. "It's how you fight for your place." The city took notice. Local news covered Marcus's program, calling him Chicago's Checkmate Kid, a symbol of resilience against systemic odds. X posts celebrated his journey, with users sharing photos of him coaching, hashtags like #MarcusInspires trending alongside clips of his championship win. Amara watched it all, her scarf draped over her shoulders, her smile wide as she saw her son become more than a champion, a beacon for others. Marcus stood in their new apartment, the Chicago skyline visible through the window, its lights no longer a taunt but a promise kept. The trophy on the wall caught the evening sun, its gleam a reminder of the board he'd turned. The Langleys' downfall was a distant hum now, their power eroded by the truth he dared to wield. But Marcus's eyes were on the future. His MIT letter, his chess program, the kids who looked at him like he'd once looked at the South Side old-timers. Amara joined him, her hand on his shoulder, the scent of her cooking grounding them. "You've made us proud, my king," she said, her voice soft but fierce. The game wasn't over. The national team awaited, and beyond it, the world stage. Marcus felt the weight of his community's hopes, but it no longer crushed him, it lifted him. He'd shown the world who they were, and he was ready for the next move. 6 months after his U.S. championship win, Marcus Reed stood on a Paris stage, the Eiffel Tower's silhouette faint through the venue's windows. The European Speed 3D Chess Championships gold medal hung heavy around his neck, its gleam catching the soft glow of chandeliers. At 14, Marcus had led the U.S. team to victory, his final checkmate against a Russian prodigy live-streamed to millions, the holographic board's lights pulsing with his triumph. The crowd's applause washed over him, a warm tide of cheers in French, English, and languages he didn't know. But Marcus's eyes searched the live stream feed projected on a screen, finding Amara's face, her tears shining from their Hyde Park apartment in Chicago. This was for her. The journey to Paris had been a whirlwind. Marcus's U.S. title, earned in the fire of the United Center's arena, had opened doors once unimaginable. MIT's scholarship letter sat framed on their new apartment's wall, a promise of a future where his 145 IQ could reshape the world. His free speed 3D chess program in Inglewood had grown, now serving thousands of kids across Chicago's South Side, their laughter and clicking chess controls filling community centers. Donors, inspired by Marcus's story, had poured in funds, turning flickering fluorescent lights into bright hubs of learning. X posts celebrated his rise, with #MarcusInspires trending alongside clips of his Paris victory, users calling him the kid who checkmated injustice. Back in Chicago, the Langleys' empire had crumbled.
Langley Tech, battered by boycotts and federal investigations into fraud and labor violations, was sold at a fraction of its value. Theodore and Eleanor retreating to a quieter life, their influence a fading echo. Preston, no longer the city's golden boy, had enrolled in a private school abroad. His chess career paused. Marcus thought of him sometimes, not with anger, but with a quiet understanding. Preston had been a pawn in his parents' game, just as Marcus had been a target. The apology Eleanor had issued on CNN, her voice strained and earrings gone, was a distant memory, overshadowed by the truth Marcus had wielded. Amara watched the Paris live stream from their new apartment, her worn Nigerian scarf draped over her shoulders. The scent of jollof rice filled the air, a ritual that grounded her through every storm. As Marcus stepped to the podium, his gold medal glinting, she leaned closer to the screen, her hands trembling. He'd been 12 when he'd promised her, "Mom, I'll show them who we are." Now, at 14, he'd shown the world. Her tears fell, not from pain, but from a pride so deep it ached, a mother's heart swelling for the boy who'd carried their dreams from Nigeria's violence to this stage.
Marcus took the microphone, his voice steady, his black hoodie swapped for a simple blazer, a nod to his new life. "Chess taught me something," he said, his words clear over the crowd's hush. "The truth is stronger than power, and dignity lasts longer than money." He held up the medal, its ribbon catching the light. "This is for my mom, Amara, who taught me to fight with heart. For my community, who showed me how to stand tall. For every kid who's told they don't belong." The crowd roared, their applause shaking the hall. Livestream viewers flooding X with his words. Amara clutched her scarf, her sobs mixing with laughter, the sound of a dream fulfilled. Back in Chicago, Senator Clara Evans watched the stream, her eyes bright with pride. She'd pushed for education reforms inspired by Marcus, securing funding for STEM programs in underserved neighborhoods. Her office had become a hub for change, with Marcus's story as its spark. "He's not just a champion," she told reporters, her voice firm. "He's proof that talent and truth can break any barrier." Marcus returned to Inglewood a week later, stepping into the community center where it all began. The fluorescent lights buzzed, but the room was alive with kids, their hands moving holographic pieces on donated 3D boards. A girl, no older than 10, her sneakers as worn as Marcus's once were, looked up at him. "Teach me that night move you used in Paris," she said, her eyes wide. Marcus knelt beside her, his gold medal tucked under his shirt, and guided her hand across the board. "It's not just the move," he said, echoing the old-timers who'd raised him. "It's reading your opponent, seeing their fear." The girl grinned, her pawn sliding forward, and Marcus saw himself in her, hungry, determined, unbroken. Amara joined him, her presence a quiet strength. The center's walls, once peeling, were now painted with murals of chess pieces and Chicago skyline, a gift from local artists inspired by Marcus's win. The scent of her cooking drifted from a nearby kitchen, where she'd started teaching cooking classes to parents, her own way of giving back. "You've done it, my king," she whispered, her hand on his shoulder. Marcus smiled, the weight of the medal light compared to her faith. The Chicago skyline glowed outside, its lights a promise kept. Marcus's journey from a housekeeper's son to a world champion had rewritten the board. His program grew, reaching kids in New York, LA, and beyond, each lesson a reminder that talent could thrive anywhere. As he taught the girl her next move, the hum of the center blending with Amara's laughter, Marcus felt the truth of his own words. Dignity outlasted money, and the truth always won. The game was over, but his fight, for himself, for his mother, for his community, was just beginning.